Hello and welcome to Thursday Thoughts. Thursday Thoughts? What on earth are they, I hear you ask? Well, my friend Lucy and I meet every week over on Instagram to talk all things personal growth because she is as obsessed with it as I am. And we decided that we might as well put those conversations out as a weekly podcast. So now you can listen to us chat here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And we'll be talking about topics such as spirituality, limiting beliefs, the ego, imposter syndrome, gratitude, meditation, confidence, and so much more. So if you're ready, here we go.
So we are talking about fear, and one of the main things that I would say about fear, and I think obviously you and I are talking about fear not in terms of fear of spiders like I have or the fear of flying, but we're talking about the fear of getting visible, the fear of what people think, all those kinds of fear things when it comes to, I guess, any kind of transformation in your life. And I think the main thing about fear, one of the main things about fear, is that number one, it's always going to be there when you are trying to up level in any way, do anything different, or make any kind of transformation in your life. It is always going to be there. So I think that we need to get used to sort of having fear in the passenger seat and just going, yes, I know you're there, and I know you want to stop me doing all of these things, and I know you're just trying to protect me, because it's essentially our ego just trying to protect ourselves. But we just have to get comfortable with doing those things anyway. And actually, this live is a really good example of fear, because the reason I personally wanted, and I think both of us wanted to do this live, is because going live on Instagram was something that used to scare the absolute crap out of me. And I never would have thought that I would ever have done this a few years ago. It just wouldn't have even occurred to me as being something that I would consider doing. And the very first time I did a live on my own, I sat with my phone and I was trying to pluck up the courage to press the go live button. And I think I must have sat there for about 45 minutes, like no joke, about 45 minutes, trying to pluck up the courage to just do it. But the fear was so strong that when I actually did press live, I think I went on for like a minute. And I felt so flustered, and it was just a nightmare. And then I didn't save it, so it didn't go onto my kind of grid. But the thing about it is that we need to just essentially accept the fact that it is always going to be there, and it's a question of us just accepting that and moving through the fear and coming out the other side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that whole thing, isn't it, of, just getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. Fear it shows up in so many ways, and often in ways that we don't realize that it's actually fear. Fear essentially is not a bad thing, because it's here to keep us safe. It's to help, it's kind of, we need it for survival, and that's why we get it. But unfortunately, we haven't evolved. Our modern day lives are very, well, not unfortunately, but our modern day lives are very different to how we evolved. So we get the same response from that fear as if we're running for our lives, we're surviving. Our brain. But what happens is basically, our brain almost, it turns, we stop thinking so clearly because we've kind of got these heightened alertness to just focus on one thing, which is survival. We get that physical response. Your heart starts to beat faster, you get the clammy hands, all the blood is moving to your limbs, your heart rate goes up, all of your blood sugar levels go up. And all of this is to prime you to actually go and run away from that tiger or fight it or whatever. But obviously in our modern day lives, we don't have those threats. We have a really scary thing we might have to go and do, like a presentation or an email we've got to respond to. We don't really want to do it. But we have the same thing, that, perceived fear, we get the same response as if it was actually a real threat. So it's about recognizing those signs, and obviously those signs, a lot of those physical things which happen aren't very good for us. If we're in that constant state and we don't turn off that response, it's really not very good for our health. But also it's not very good for our thinking, because if you think, like, when you've got that sort of you're really scared of something or really anxious about something, you can't think clearly. And this makes me really think about that time, because there's obviously some fear which is people like scary movies or going on fairground rides, but one thing which I am always terrified of is the ghost train. There's a ghost train on the pier here in Brighton, which I've been made to go on by my kids a few times, and I swear to God, every time I go, I know it's the most ridiculous thing. I know it's the most ridiculous thing because I know it's not real. I know none of it's real, but I hate it so much, and I scream so badly. But there's no rationality about it. I have no rational thinking. And if you think in our day-to-day life, when we're constantly in that state of being scared, our thinking goes out the window. We can't think clearly. So it's really important, I think, to just be aware of those things which really make us scared, and whatever that might be. And as you said, is showing up on Instagram doing these sorts of things and just doing them anyway, and because I believe that really the best way to kind of face fear, well, to get rid of fear, is just to face it. And give yourselves take little sips of it. Don't obviously just expose it and then have a complete freak out, but just take little sips of it. And it just, this is a very good example of you and I sitting here doing this now. I don't know how many lives we've done, but it feels now actually not scary at all. I don't really think much about doing this, and I've released all of that fear and anxiety about it. So yeah, sorry, I went off on a bit of a weird.
No, but I totally agree with what you said, and it's so interesting, isn't it? How yes, we do. The problem with our fear today is that, like you so rightly said, it's actually we are designed to fear the things that they are an actual physical threat. But the problem is today that the way we've evolved means that now we feel fear about sending somebody an email, or about handing our notice in at work, or about coming live on Instagram, or all of those kinds of things, which, and like you say, they send us into that fight or flight mode, so that our brains, that we are not thinking straight, because actually our bodies are just in fight or flight mode, ready to fight or flee. But I think
or freeze it can do as well. Yeah,
fight or freeze. Yeah, exactly. But I think what we have got to realize is that if we're not feeling any kind of fear ever in our lives, then we're probably not changing or growing or evolving, because there is no way that you can change or grow or evolve without fear, because anything that we do that is outside of the ordinary for us, relative to our lives, we're going to feel it. So I think the first step in kind of overcoming fear is just accepting, or becoming aware of it, and accepting the fact that we're never going to get around it. Like we're never going to get around it. And like you say, we have to go through it and come out the other side, because it's always going to be there. So I always think it's almost like you have to, when you realize that you're afraid of doing something, again, let's take going live on Instagram as an example, you almost have to talk to that part of yourself and say, I know you're scared, I know you don't want me to do this, I know you're thinking, no, I'm going to make such a dick of myself and la la la. But if you just sort of talk to it as if it's like a separate entity, and just have it sitting next to you, because it is always going to be there sat next to you, there's just no two ways about it, then it just takes those sort of 10 seconds of courage to just do the thing. And also, the thing that I find about fear is so often much worse in our minds than it actually is in reality. So that's another thing I think we've got to bear in mind, is that it feels so much worse. But what is worse is, I think anyway, is that what is worse is never getting to a place where we can face our fears and move through them, and therefore staying exactly the same and not moving forward ever.
Yeah, exactly. I can think of so many times in my life where I faced that fear and I've done it anyway. And yes, it is never, ever as bad as you think. And then that amazing feeling you get after you've done the thing,
yeah,
because you're so proud of yourself, and you realize, my gosh, I did it. I overcame this thing, and actually it wasn't half as terrifying as I thought. And then that capacity that you've then given yourself means that you've expanded your capacity for fear. So next time you can push yourself a little bit further. And what's on the other side of that fear is so much greater than the fear itself. That again, it comes down to that thing of courage. It's just really having that courage to step into that uncomfortableness, and then go through it. And it is amazing. And of course, we're all doing it all the time. I don't think you ever stop. You can keep, and it's if you want to keep expanding, if you want to keep growing as a person, then you are just going to have to face it, because as you said, if we don't, we're just going to stay the same forever. We're just going to keep small. Nothing's moving, nothing's growing. You become quite stagnant in the way you are. And do you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. If you're very happy in your life now and you're happy with it going along, being the same, then great. But if you're not, the only way you can then move forward, to expand, to grow, is to really get comfortable with pushing yourself. And you've just got to do it very, very gradually. But yes, I'm just trying to think of a good example of what I've done recently. I mean, gosh, I said yes to doing that talk at this festival I went to, and that terrified me to go and, but I did it, I just turned up and I did it, and it was not half as bad. And the one thing actually I was most impressed by for myself was how I managed to completely control my nerves, because I was really worried. Because sometimes when you do something really scary, sometimes that your body can take over. Those physical responses suddenly start to take over. So you get the shakes, your voice starts to go, you start really sweating, and then once you're aware that that's quite apparent, and then everyone else might notice it, but it gets worse and worse. But with this, I had really visualized myself doing this talk. It was all going to go okay. I practiced it. I did about 15 minutes of breath work beforehand, really calming myself down. And the one thing I did not feel in that talk were the nerves. It was amazing. It was really amazing. And it really proved to myself, you can overcome those physical feelings, which I think is what stops us so much, because it's horrible, isn't it, when you particularly get the shakes.
And also they can be quite debilitating. I mean, I've had it before where I had a music scholarship at school, and I used to have to play solo at school and do these kind of concerts, and it was like my absolute nightmare. And then I was in a band in my early 20s, and and I had a real issue with stage fright. And in fact, it basically, because I should be a freaking rock star. That's my parallel life. That was always what I wanted. I wanted to be a singer. That was it. That was my kind of thing. Because music has always been my passion. And anyway, we did have many gigs, and it was actually a nightmare, because I never got to grips with that fear. And like you so rightly say, it's the bodily, I can't speak. It's the bodily bit of it that can be incredibly difficult to overcome, because when you're doing something like stepping out on a stage and singing, or giving a talk, or whatever it is, when you get that kind of, I used to get it where, and I know I can sing. I know that I can sing. So it was incredibly frustrating that as soon as I was in front of an audience, my voice would just go, and it physically would not come out properly, and my voice was shaking. It was horrible. So I think using things like breath work to deal with the physical side of fear is brilliant. And also one thing that I do, and I've said this to coaching clients as well, is I always ask myself the question, what is the worst that can happen? What is the worst? So take, again, Instagram Live. What is the worst that can happen? Well, and then you sort of start answering the question. So, well, I could make a twat of myself. Okay, Lucy, so if you make a twat of yourself, then what? Well, then I'll feel really stupid. Okay, so you'll feel really stupid, and then what? Well, then I'll just feel bad about feeling stupid. And if you sort of drill down and you ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen? And then you just keep asking, you'll realize that actually the worst that can happen is really not that bad. And and I would wager that a lot of the time when we are really afraid, what we are afraid of is what other people are going to think. And I think it so often comes down to that. It so often comes down to that. So there you've got to ask yourself, well, okay, so if all the people I'm worried about laughing at me, judging me, whatever, if they all do that, if they all get together in a room and go, oh my God, look at Lucy, isn't she such a dick, or whatever, what's the worst that can happen with that? Well, okay, so how is that actually going to affect my life or change my life? Well, it's not really, because it's so I think the point is that when you start really kind of examining it, then, and you start asking yourself, well, what is the worst that can happen? And if the worst that can happen is that the people that you're afraid of judging you do actually judge you, well, what's even, so what? So bloody what? So I think
it comes back.
Sorry.
It comes back to, did we do an episode on what people think?
I can't remember.
I can't remember, but it's, or maybe we did something on comparison anyway. But yes, it's really releasing what other people think, because if you can release what other people think, you'll say, right, it comes back to that, and actually, who cares? Just do it anyway. It really is.
Yeah, totally.
A very quick break to ask you to hit the follow or subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you're enjoying this episode, I'd be super grateful if you could hit those stars and rate it too. Thank you.
Holly, because you are training, or you're nearly trained in breathwork, what would you advise that people, because like you say, you did 15 minutes breathwork before that talk that you did the other weekend, and it really helped your nerves. And I've actually just been listening to a Huberman Lab podcast. Have you ever heard of Huberman Lab?
Yeah. Yes, was it on? I bet was it on the physiological side you were listening about?
Exactly.
Yes.
It was. Yeah, it was. And so because the power of the breath is an incredible thing, and when you're feeling nervous, when you're feeling fear, that's such a good way, isn't it, of allaying that. So what would you
well, that's that Huberman Lab episode. So yeah, I've listened to that, which is all about the research behind the physiological sigh, which is basically a breath which is, it's a 2-part breath in through the nose, so, and then you breathe out through the mouth, or you can actually breathe out through the nose, it's up to you, but so it's like taking a big breath in through the nose and then almost like another little sip in through the nose and then out. And what it's really doing is just allowing your body to move from that fear state really into the parasympathetic state. It's it's a real magic tool, but you can do that in the moment. It's probably the best thing you can do in the moment of when you're actually feeling those physical responses. So yeah, it's just like so that's a really good one, and you just need to do it 5 times and you can actually almost feel a difference in your body. So yeah, you can do that over and over again. I mean, or you just simply, so I was doing that before that talk, I was doing that one, and I was also just doing in through the nose, out through the mouth. And it's just really just allowing, though, I mean, if you can allow your exhales to be slightly longer than your inhales, that really is a great way of shifting your body into that more relaxed state. And just keeping that going, and it just brings down your heart rate. It just allows your body to return to that real rest and digest mode. And those physical responses will really start to ease. And yeah, it does really, really work. It's so powerful.
Yeah, completely. So I think a combination of that and just giving yourself a bit of a talking to ultimately really, really helps. Because again, going back to what we were saying earlier, if we want to do something that we haven't done before, we will always be faced by fear. And also remember that even the people who are kind of, owning it, or even the people who are sort of hugely successful and doing seemingly really scary things, even they, what I'm trying to say is that I don't think there is anyone who doesn't get scared. Even the most successful people, I think they still, it's not that they don't feel fear, because it's just not possible to not feel fear because we're human. But even those highly successful people will still be feeling the fear, but it's the way that you deal with it, and whether you allow it to hold you back. And I think the question to ask yourself is, you know, am I going to allow my fear of whatever it may be, am I going to allow that to hold me back from doing the things in my life that I want to do? And I think, you know, we both have a podcast. I think that's another good example of doing something that we were both really frightened. I mean, when my first episode of the podcast went out, I felt physically sick. And I have felt sick many, many times since. But it's just asking yourself, okay, so I'm not going to do it then. So I'm not going to do this thing that I really want to do. Might be really great, that might, you know, open up a world of opportunities, which it has. Am I not going to do that because I don't like feeling fear, and I refuse to deal with my fear? Is that how I'm going to live my life? So that's the question you have to ask yourself. Are you going to live your life dictated by your fear? If you choose to do that, then you're probably not going to do anything. You're probably not going to do anything very different from what you've been doing for the last 20 years.
Yeah, you have a choice.
Yeah.
It all boils down to a choice. You know, you can be paralyzed by your fear and take no action, or you can actually face it and you can do it. We always have a choice. And when you realize that you have a choice, actually that is a great way to move forward. A lot of our fear, I think, is so irrational. So another question that you can ask yourself, you know, is really, when you identify what that fear is, it's like, actually, is that true? Because half the time it's not going to make any sense. It's not going to be true. You might just going, I can't do that because let's say, okay, doing the podcast, I can't do that because I'm going to balls it up and I actually don't have much to say, which is one of the fears I had. You know, it's like, what if I don't have anything said? It's like, well, is that really true? And it's like, well, of course I've got something to say. There's going to be something I'm going to talk about. And, you know, the great thing with a podcast, if I balls it up, then I can edit it out. I can get rid of it. So it really is a decision to just, what do you want? What do you want from your life? Stay where you are, stay stuck, or actually just do it. And I think it also applies to, you know, to health and wellness, and all, you know, if you're one of these people who are going, okay, I really, for example, say you want to lose weight and you feel like you've been really, really struggling with it. Again, it's a decision that you have to make. You know, what's stopping you? There's something, probably some worry, some anxiety. It might be that you're worried you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to stick to it. But actually, you know, again, is that true? No, it's not. Of course, you've got a decision to make. So it's just really unpicking some of those beliefs which are holding you in that fear state, and just questioning them. And actually, the moment you start to question them and highlight them, then they start to fizzle away, and then you can start to move forward.
Completely. I love that. One other thing that that's just come to mind also is that when I feel scared of doing something, I check in with myself about what is my why, what is my reason for wanting to do this thing. Because when you are really sure of your why in life or in something that you want to do, you know, the reasons why you want to do something, if you're really connected to that and you know exactly why you want to do something, you know what you want to get out of it, then it's a lot easier, I find, to be able to face your fear. Because when you're so fixed in why you're doing something, then you just become more able to just go, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to do this because I know why I'm doing this. I know where I'm headed. I know what I want, and therefore I know I have to go through this fear because my why is so clear. And that can be, you know, I am going to have my notice in because I know that I cannot stay in this job any longer. I have to get out of this job. That is my why. And yes, it scares the absolute shit out of me. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to get another job, blah, 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 blah. But I know in my heart of hearts that I have to leave this job because it is killing my soul, for example. So when you think of your why, I think that's I think that can help. I had another point, really irritating. It's completely gone out of my head. I might remember it in a second.
Yeah, I mean, work is a big one. Leaving a job is quite, gosh, I remember when I wanted to leave my teaching job, you know, and you just feel like you're going to let everyone down. You feel like you're going to let your team down. And with teaching, I was like, oh my God, you know, all these children. I feel, you know, that and you do. And yet at the same time, you've got to think ultimately of what's best for you. Put yourself first, and what's going to nourish your mind, your body, your soul. And when you can, you know, and that really is part of it. I think it's what makes you happy, what feels good, and then you can actually find it easier to make that move.
Yeah,
you're so right.
I've remembered the thing that I was going to say, which is that if you don't have anything in your diary over the next month that gives you butterflies, then you ain't moving forward. And I try to have something in my calendar regularly that doesn't have to be utterly terrifying, but just something that makes me go a bit like, oh God, like, you know, whether it be being interviewed for somebody else's podcast or you know, whatever it is. If you have, you know, you should really try and have something in your diary, let's say every couple of weeks or every month, that slightly scares you. Because if you have something in your diary that scares you, then you know that you are making progress in your life. You know that you're moving forward. So I think that's just something to bear in mind.
And I think it's important to differentiate between the thing which is there, which is going to slightly scare you, and something which actually you don't really want to be doing, and you get that feeling of like, actually I don't really want to do that. It's quite a fine line, I think, because the thing which slightly scares you it's got to be something that you know you actually want to do, and you know it's going to be good for you in some way, rather than filling your calendar or your diary with things which actually make you feel a bit sick because they're probably not the right thing for you. You know, they're not right. So I know that I have to learn. I'm learning that, to make, you know, really differentiate between those things that, you know, which are good for me, and those things actually which aren't aligned with what I want to actually be doing. So
yeah, very, very good point. Very good point. And I suppose it's almost like the thing that scares you should also somewhere slightly excite you as well. Yeah. Because if it's aligned with what you want to be doing, and even if it's something that's not necessarily particularly pleasant, but you know it's heading you in the direction of where you want to go. So yes, I suppose
those feelings of anxiety, for example, you know, you get those feelings in your tummy. And by the way, anxiety is a form of fear. Anxiety generally is more about a fear of things which are still yet to come, or sometimes it's kind of can be prolonged. It's kind of described as prolonged fear if you're experiencing the same sort of fears again and again, but often it's sort of in the future. But those feelings of anxiety, or those feelings of nervousness, shall I say, if you are going to go and talk on stage or something, are very, very similar to feelings of excitement, which we get in our tummy before something. So a really good way is just to try and reframe those feelings. If you are feeling a little bit anxious, you've got those butterflies in your tummy, and actually it's like, actually I think I'm really excited because it's a very similar feeling. You know, our bodies kind of react in a similar way. So yeah.
Well, it's 29 minutes past 9.
Yes.
So I think we're DONE done.
I think we are.
I hope this has been helpful to somebody out there.
I hope so. So yeah, it's always a pleasure, Lucy, on a Monday morning. I'm always a bit like, gosh, do I have anything to say? I don't know if I have anything to say, and then we always manage to talk about something.
Yeah, so I know, I feel exactly the same way. It's like, shit, am I going to have anything to say about this? And then somehow the half hour just goes.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it was lovely to see you, and I'll see you in a little bit.
Cool. All right.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye, guys.